We should learn from our relatively recent history, my brother. That's where I'm coming from. I say all power to the people.
And now, the most underrated voice in all media.
Ochelli. What? Ochelli. Ochelli. What? Ochelli. I hate your music.
Chuck Ochelli.
Second hour of the Ochelli Effect begins now here at Ochelli.com, but also heard on a variety of other affiliates. We do appreciate all of you for tuning in. Anyway, if you're catching this in podcast form, you're going to need to refer to the show notes to find out where you can pre-order the book, which is by my guest tonight, Joan Mellen, the author, but she's a lot more than an author. I'll tell you, listen, I'm going to include a link to joanmellen.com so you can go and read about the author if you like a bit. I'm going to also include the link to pre-order the book, which is Blood in the Water, How the U.S. and Israel Conspired to Ambush the USS Liberty, which is the topic tonight. But, of course, Joan's written about a great many other topics, and as I said before, she's been on the show quite a few times, and I always am happy and learn something every time Joan is on the show.
I forgot to mention the name.
Yeah.
Chuck, we need to mention the name of the publisher, Prometheus Books.
Prometheus is publishing this. Okay, I didn't even notice that, to be honest with you, because you've actually worked with several publishers over the years.
Yeah, no, yes, and you know, whoever wants to do a topic, this publisher, Prometheus Books, they like to do books of historical events that are not solved, that people don't know about, and this is a perfect book for them because it's an open story. People still don't know exactly what happened, and that's partly because they don't want it. They're afraid of the material. Goes right to the root of the American imperial enterprise, if you want to put it that way. And the relationship of U.S. and Israel, it's like a taboo topic, along with the Kennedy assassination.
Well, there's a whole bunch of taboo topics in here. First of all, to cast aspersions on Lyndon Baines Johnson is apparently not in vogue at the moment. Because as you said earlier in this discussion, his current official biographers, what are they doing but whitewashing his entire existence?
And I know that I was very friendly in the past, maybe in the 80s, with Robert Caro. I even bought, at one point I was invited to his birthday party, and I bought a cake, a huge cake in the shape of the LBJ Ranch, with cows and horses and cowboys, and it was a cake. So, I mean, I really, I knew him quite well, and at that time I didn't know any of this, and I didn't really know until recently, really, the depth to which he's covered up. But those people who have read his most recent book realize he's distorted the Kennedy. He had to write about the Kennedy assassination. Right. There was no way around that. And there he gives the official Warren Commission story. And that's just been disproved over and over again. So he just was terrified of the subject, obviously. And I just wonder, his new book, the last volume, would be covering 1967 and would be covering the USS Liberty, but I don't know if it will. I don't know. Maybe we'll force him into it to look at this.
Well, maybe there'll be a mention there, but I can guarantee you it's not going to even remotely resemble what you produced here in this book.
No, but the object of he and Robert Dallek as well, they want to rehabilitate Johnson as a credible figure, and it's part of protecting the mainstream politics of the country. If you have a president who's a murderer, as in the case of Lyndon Johnson, and I'm not talking about his killing Kennedy, here he is really responsible for the deaths of all those people, and many of them, maybe half of them at least, that if the planes had been allowed to go and go to the site of where the ship was being attacked, some lives could have been saved. So he abandoned American sailors unarmed in the field of battle that they hadn't sought after themselves, and got away with it, didn't he?
Well,
and even when let me just say this: even the sailors, the survivors, actually filed a war crime report against Israel in 2004, which is something that when you want to file that in the military, you have to deposit it at the Pentagon, and they never answered. It was never answered. But the petition itself does not mention Lyndon Johnson. And I asked the author of the petition, who was one of the people in the Air Force who actually was aware of the Liberty incident at the time, where's Lyndon Johnson's name on this? Because he certainly committed war crimes, and he hung up. He wouldn't talk to me, and he wouldn't see me. This was on the phone. And what could you do? So
right. I actually have a PDF of something that is dated and listed as war crimes committed against U.S. military personnel, June 8, 1967, and it was submitted to the Secretary of the Army.
Oh, yes, you have that's the petition that the Liberty Veterans Association filed, and the war crime petition. That's right.
Right.
That's what I'm referring to.
Exactly. I'm going to put a link to that along with this show, and also it's in the live chat room. You can read it for yourself. It was actually filed, according to this, in 2005. Let's see, actually on June 8th, 2005, indeed. So, wow, almost 40 years later, 38 years after the fact, they filed this. And as you said, it has not been answered, right?
No, it was never answered. And there have been books about this in international law that have, discussed all the violations, and including one by a person named Walter Jacobson. He was in the Navy, and lists all the violations and war crimes. And certainly to blow up the lifeboats. See, they had released the lifeboats into the water because the captain had actually, in the midst of the attack, had ordered them to abandon ship, and so then they threw these. They let the lifeboats inflate in order to save some people. If the ship is going to sink, you need lifeboats, and the Israelis they machine gunned the life rafts so that they couldn't be used. And one life raft they grabbed and they took it to, as a souvenir, back to Israel.
I wasn't aware that they took a souvenir back to Israel, but I did refer to that earlier, and as far as I understand, there are multiple aspects of the Geneva Conventions that specifically prohibit attacking lifeboats or things which are being utilized to save lives that are unarmed on a battlefield. I could have swore there were rules against this, Joan. Maybe I'm mistaken?
Well, no, I think that this is definitely prohibited. Prohibited.
Yeah, so,
but, people do what they do. And I think I don't want to get into the Israeli politics too much, but, I can understand, after the Holocaust, the Israeli position is what rules? What humane rules in war? They certainly weren't. Didn't the Nazi period destroy all civilities in war?
Well, see, unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that was developed as, reasonable agreements between civilized nations, allegedly, came after that, right? A lot of it came after that, including, things like bans on medical testing on, unwilling subjects, things like this, a whole array.
Well, there's also Agent Orange and the napalm and all the murdering of villagers in the Vietnam War. We are guilty.
But by the way, one question I do have for you. I once read that it was white phosphorus which was utilized on the Liberty. Napalm may have also been dumped on it, but was white phosphorus also used during the attack?
Not that I know of. It was napalm. A lot of canisters of napalm, and it ignites and makes fires.
Yeah,
no, it was napalm.
No,
when you look at the histories of the scene, I never heard of white phosphorus, but maybe they meant napalm when I don't know.
Well,
but I could just tell you.
There's a lot of my point is there's a lot of confusion about this, and to be honest with you, I know the type of research that you've done. You probably clarify a bunch of things that you're not even aware of in this book. Just letting you know that, because there's a lot of speculation. You notice I said that there might have been Russians who were present, who were, flying around, or Soviet planes. I have also read that there were other planes that happened to be in the area that might have put eyes on it, who might have not been aware of what was happening. I've read about the Israelis who refused to fire upon the Liberty. I've read about
now. Let's get back to the Soviets, because I want to add a point, and that is on the night after June 8th, the night of June 8th, after the shooting is done, and they're just wobbling around in the water. The ship was listing, at 10 degrees, I think.
Well, it's crippled. Well, let's paint the entire picture. It's crippled. It's got a 40-foot hole in it.
Right.
The circumference or the the diameter, not sure, but either way, it's 40 feet. Okay, large hole. Power is obviously challenged or gone.
And now the U.S. is not coming. Nobody's coming to help.
And
they're all alone out there. Nobody's coming. And on the horizon appears a Soviet ship. And the Soviet commander, in English, sends a message to the Liberty, do you need help? And the Liberty answers, no, thank you. And the Soviets say, well, we'll stay here for a few hours, through the night, just in case you need us. And they did. Now, these people who say, oh, we don't need it, go away, these are people who were educated in the Cold War. And their Cold War thinking is Soviets are no good, and we don't want anything to do with you, you're the enemy. But the fact is that the Soviets behaved impeccably throughout the story, and I trace the Soviet presence in the Mediterranean in relation to the Liberty throughout the book. So I can tell you they appear, and the Soviets were doing the same thing. They had surveillance ships.
Right.
So they understood. And then there's a whole story that I have about the Soviet submarine, that somehow on that submarine they developed a leak of mercury. And the men on that submarine were dying and sick and throwing up, whatever. And the captain wires Moscow and says, I want to come back and bring these people to the hospital. And they thought that this was so serious a situation that they said no. So that's another aspect of the story.
Well, there's a lot of considerations there, because the Soviets, to become entangled in this now, could, a lot of things could be misconstrued or misrepresented later on. It's actually kind of dangerous for that Soviet captain to have even offered assistance, given the,
You mean on the night before, on the night after, rather after the attack?
Right.
Yes, but you could see they have a good spy system too, and they could see what was going on.
Here's actually a question from a live listener, which I think is a good one. Were the men that you spoke to that were on the ship that survived, were they immediately aware that they were attacked by Israeli assets? Or
yes, they were. Well, that's a very good question. Well, on the same day as the attack, late in the afternoon, Israel said they did it. They accepted responsibility, and they said they did it. And it was a mistake, and it was an accident, and they did. So the same day, they took responsibility. They wanted, I think it's when you look at the political thing, you realize that they took the responsibility to take any chance away that the people could begin to blame the United States for this in some way. But they immediately stepped forward, and they've kept quiet about this for all these years, 50 years. They've really covered for the United States on this business, and Israel has covered for them. You see, it was in neither of their interests to tell the truth. And the United States has worked hard on every president since Johnson to keep up the cover-up and not to get into this. And many sailors have called their representatives and senators and asked for help to get in. They're calling for a new investigation, because the first naval inquiry, which is the only one, was fraud. And so Dave lived in Vermont at the time, so you know who his United States senator was. Mm-hmm. So this United States senator answers the phone, as he was wont to do, and Bernie Sanders says, I can't get involved with that. And then the other senator was Patrick Leahy, And he also said, I can't get involved with that. Well, Dave then said to Bernie Sanders, listen, you don't have to do that because I know a rabbi who's very sympathetic to the liberty, and you can do it through him. And Sanders said that isn't appropriate either. His phrase was, it isn't appropriate. Which is sort of kind of makes you a little bit down on Bernie Sanders. And what does he have to lose? He's an older man now. And why can't you tell the truth? And why can't you stand up for people? But of course, if you do, you're out of politics. Because the Israelis have a very strong lobby. It's called AIPAC, AIPAC.
Right.
And they will destroy you and make you lose an election. One of the people that happened to was the son of Adlai Stevenson. Adlai Stevenson, the one that ran against President Eisenhower. And he was at the time in the United States Senate, and he wanted to run for governor of Illinois. And he ran for governor, and he lost by a tiny bit. But the AIPAC really came out, and he lost.
Well, it's no strange coincidence or accident that even in 2016 we observed every viable presidential candidate, including the guy who's in office now, went before AIPAC and pledged that they would do the right thing. See, that's a very powerful, that's the American Israeli Political Action Committee. And they are extremely powerful. And I have this funny feeling that they certainly wouldn't want to pick at this scab. That's really the way that they look at it.
This is very important. And when I called various Israeli writers, including one named Avner Cohen, who had written the book Israel and the Bomb. So, which they've had since the 60s. It's another part of the story. And President Kennedy gets involved with that. Anyway, I called him. I asked him about the liberty, and he said that it's a comedy of errors.
Comedy of errors?
Comedy of errors.
Wow. You know, see, that's a weird thing because in recent years, again, the concept that maybe the Mossad had Kennedy killed is popularized in certain circles at this point over the fact that there was a problem with giving them nukes, basically. I mean, let's just cut to the chase. We
didn't have to give them nukes. They have had nukes since Kennedy's day.
Yeah, well,
since and not only nukes, weapons, not just the material, but the actual weapons. They've had nuclear weapons since 1963.
Yeah, right. But the point is,
they lied to President Kennedy.
Yeah.
Shimon Peres said, Israel will not be the first country in the Middle East to get nuclear weapons. And of course they were. They had them.
Well, see,
that's also another taboo subject.
Right.
You're not going to hear that.
Well, but that's why I bring it up right here and now because the bottom line is, look, I have no qualms with bringing up realities, and people talk about this as being a motive for why the Mossad wanted to kill JFK. The problem is there would be no need for it because they already had this stuff. I mean, we know.
Well,
that
that's right. That's right, and they also outsmarted Kennedy. And when he sent inspectors to, they would have to do inspections of these places. They created new elevators. They built new buildings. They were able. They said it was a holiday. Somehow nobody got to see anything.
Right.
So they didn't need to kill him. They could outsmart us.
Right. Well, exactly. So that's why that whole assertion falls apart on its face. That's all I meant to say. And, but when we talk about this collaboration between the U.S. government, assets here, because, we're talking about Johnson, his people, obviously the, straight-laced sort of military guys were a bit confused by this whole thing. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a need to recall the wings when, when they were sent out, because they never would have been sent out if the military was entirely, in the loop regarding all this, right? So,
well, they wanted to keep as many people out of the loop as possible. One of the people who was in the loop was the admiral who was in charge of the Sixth Fleet, and I described that in the book, William Inman Martin. And but the rest of the admirals, and that was hard to get that information, you can imagine, but I got it. Anyway, I lost my train of thought.
Well, I'm sorry. I do that to people. It's probably my fault. Let me, you know what? Let's just throw in another live listener question, which I've gotten text to me, which I actually want to know about because I've seen this mentioned elsewhere. They want to know if Captain McGonagall was, I believe that's how you pronounce it, McGonagall,
yeah.
McGonagall, was awarded the, a Medal of Honor, but in secret.
Yes, well, and not quite in secret, but in sort of in a shabby place, a naval yard, and it was given to him by a Navy guy, rather than the usual thing is for a Medal of Honor to be awarded at the White House by the president.
Right.
And Johnson didn't want to have any part of that, and so he's got but he never deserved it anyway. Shouldn't have even have gotten it at all. Because he lied at the naval inquiry, and he lied. He just was part of the cover-up from day one. I described that whole thing in the book, and and his daughter admitted to one of the sailors, "Daddy lied."
Well, see,
but he was corrupted as a result of his lies. He got a new. He was going to be he was at the end of his career, and he got a new command, a new ship. He was a promotion, everything. He was paid off.
Well, right, but at the same time, let me offer something about that.
I'm sorry. What was the question? I forgot. What was the question that the person asked?
If he had been awarded the Medal of Honor in secret, you answered.
Oh, in secret. Right. Okay.
But here's the thing about that. Is it just a matter of being corrupted, or do you think maybe it was a matter of, look, I'm just a captain, and these people obviously, I can't buck the system. In some cases, I mean, was he really a bad guy in this story at the end of it?
He got rewarded, Chuck. He got rewarded. He was bribed. Look what he wanted, and he was a very ambitious individual.
Okay.
And he got another command. It's very hard to get a command and a promotion, and his career was revived. And he sold his soul for that and for a medal.
No,
please.
Fair enough.
I mean, he wasn't a conspirator in the event. Now, whether what he had foreknowledge of is maybe open to some question, but he never dreamed that the attack would be the way it was, that level of attack.
Well, I'm sure if he had foreknowledge of it, he wouldn't have imagined that. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been on the ship.
He had some nervousness. And that's shown by the fact that he ordered a drill an hour before the attack. And a drill means that everybody has to go to their place, their station, where they're and in a certain amount of time, and all the hatches sealed, and as if they were really being attacked. And they did that like an hour before the attack. And they had done several of these drills during the course of the week, leading up to this attack. So you have to say I think he knew something, but the cover. I mean, he lied, and all these people. Once after this happened, he saw what happened. He also lied about many things. Lloyd Painter. I mean, when the captain had a wound in his leg, and he was bleeding, and in his shoes, blood is in his shoes, and he's lying about. He said he's remained at his post throughout the attack. And then Lloyd Painter went up there, and he took a picture of him unconscious with the blood coming out of his leg. And I have it, but it didn't come out very clear. But I have it in the book that he, because Painter was appalled. He betrayed his men. It's like you don't do that.
Right, and at the center of this is Painter, which is really interesting because again, you said he was liked by everybody who survived and was still alive.
Dave Lewis is the one that's liked
Dave
by
Lewis.
everybody.
Dave Lewis. I'm sorry. Dave Lewis, but Painter's story about going into the Secret Service, that's who that was. Lewis.
The elevator.
Yeah.
He never, Lloyd Painter, he never protected any of the Johnson family. He guarded Mamie Eisenhower, Kissinger, various people, but never, any Johnsons.
Well, in fairness, I mean, Lyndon Johnson only lived to 1971 anyway. So, I mean...
Well, yeah. But, I think the family was entitled to Secret Service protection ever after, weren't they? After? I don't know.
I think Lady Bird was... I'm not exactly sure how that works once the president's gone. I know that, they get it, and, what was it, Harry Truman, I think, was famously one of the guys who refused it. to take Secret Service protection after he left the presidency, right? But otherwise, it's an interesting tale there. I wonder if you wouldn't mind getting into just a couple of the other men that you wound up talking to, who maybe changed your perception on this, or caused you to have to really rethink some of this as you were writing, because.
Well, I came to this Liberty story with no preconceptions. I didn't know what it was, what happened. Everything that I got was in the course of the event. I'll tell you the other character that I didn't mention yet, who's a major character in the story, and that's not a sailor. It's the CIA station chief in Tel Aviv, and his name was John Haddon, and he's famous for being a whistleblower on the Israeli bomb and on the Israeli uranium and all that story. But he was, and he knew what he never spoke about the Liberty, although his son, who wrote a book about him, a memoir about having done many interviews with him, asked him about it. He never talked about the Liberty, but he's a fascinating character. And he tried to convince Meyer Amit before he went to New York, Washington rather, not to start the 6-Day War. And naturally that failed. But he was a very interesting, intelligent, humane man. And somebody, I try to make him a very important. He wrote a novel at the end called Bomb, talking about how the bomb and how that developed in Israel. He was really you can't have preconceived ideas that everyone who works for CIA is a villain, because it isn't so. I'm not saying that he wasn't, but he's an interesting story. And I talked to his son. I couldn't. He was dead by the time I started. But I have his photographs, and I have his papers, that his son gave me some of his papers. And I worked hard on that part of the story. And the irony, well, never mind. But I had originally had photographs on the cover of John Haddon and Meyer Amit, who meet in these important meetings prior to the 6-Day War. Mm-hmm. And the publisher showed it to the Barnes & Noble salesman, and they said, that's no good. Nobody will buy it. They won't know who those two people are on the cover.
Oh, wow.
And so it was on the cover. They had made the cover. I didn't make the cover. They did. But then it got removed from the cover. These are the pitfalls of publishing. Now, if you self-publish, you can't distribute. You can't get it to people. So you wind up using a publisher, small publisher, big publisher. Aggravation sets in one way or another. Anyway, I was very upset about that.
Well,
but the photographs that are on the cover that were once on the cover of Meyer Amit and John Haddon are in the book. So it's not a terrible catastrophe. They're there. They're in the book.
Right. So, I'm sure there's a very interesting photographic section to this book because
no, it's the photographs they decided to distribute through the book.
Oh, okay.
Not have them all together.
Okay.
Now, the advantage of having them together is that they use better paper, photo paper, and the photographs are clearer.
Right.
But on the other hand, the photographs now are intermittently mixed with the text.
Okay. Well, you know what? To be honest with you, I actually prefer that. When, I encounter a photograph as I'm reading about somebody or I see a place, and I like it when it's in context with what's going on in the book. So personally, I like that better. But
all right, you have the advantages and disadvantages. One of the things about this I didn't mention yet either was that the CIA had a submarine in the area watching the whole event.
Mm.
That shouldn't surprise us, given what we know. Anyway, how do I know that? How can I prove that? I can prove it because Ernie Gallo, who is the president of the Liberty Veterans Association right now,
right,
after this is all over, went to work for CIA in the communications department, not as a spy. But anyhow, one day he told everybody, of course, about his work on the Liberty, and one of the people that were with CIA gave him 2 photographs that were taken by that submarine and a periscope that took pictures, and it shows one picture of the Liberty prior to the attack and one after. And Ernie gave me those photographs for the book.
Mm.
That's nice.
That's
and they're
great.
in.
Yeah.
They're in.
That's absolutely great, and look, a whole lot of information in there, and fascinating stuff to look at. I want to present to you one of the other live comments, which refers to our discussion over the nuclear weapons that we were just having, and I'll just read it to you verbatim, and you do with it what you like, Joan. Okay. I think JFK would have cut off all aid to Israel as a serious repercussion for deceiving the U.S. about nuclear weapons. JFK's last two letters with Levi Eshkol, Eshkol.
Yes, he was the Prime Minister of Israel at that time. I agree with this caller. I can't say it because, of course, we don't know what would have done. But I agree with that. Kennedy couldn't stand it, and that they lied to him. It was a disgrace. It was just a disgrace. And Kennedy might well have. He wanted more parity, and that was the whole issue. Really, the Israelis wanted to cut off all aid to Egypt. And that goes into another part of the book that we probably won't be able to talk about now. It's called Operation Susanna. And this was a decade before the Liberty. And it was the Israelis sent terrorists, Egyptian Jews, as terrorists into Alexandria and, I guess, Cairo. And they planted bombs in movie theaters and in the embassy, in the libraries, in the post office. And they went. No, nobody was killed, but some were injured, and they went off, and they went in jail. Egyptians captured them. And but the Israelis were terrorists, you see, and they were terrorists. Now these Jews, they were young people. They were like graduate student age, and they wanted to be Jewish. They wanted to be Zionists, and they wanted to go live in Israel. And so they signed on to this terror operation. It's called the Lavon Affair, and also called Operation Susanna. It's well known. You can look it up on the Google and all. And Israelis denied that they had anything to do with it. And, it was another way to discredit Nasser. Anyway, eventually, the Israelis had to admit that that was an operation that was organized by the Israeli intelligence services. Now, what made me think of Operation Susanna? I don't know. But anyway, that's part of the story, prelude to the attack on liberty.
Right.
These are the kinds of things that they do. They were after Nasser. That's what I want to get at. They were after Nasser for a long time. It wasn't just in 1967 or early, 66, 67, that they got the bee in the bonnet to get rid of Nasser. He was a thorn in the side of Angleton and Dulles and various people in CIA that really were the imperial frontmen for the United States.
Right. Well, and the other thing to consider here is that the complexities of this, when people talk about the 6-day war, there is a lot of table setting before we get to that particular banquet. Okay, and
that's right. And I wanted to tell the listeners that you can't really write about the USS Liberty. Some have, of course, but you can't write about it without discussing Operation Susanna.
Well,
And by the way, at the end, I want to say at the end, after accusing everyone of everything, at the end, the Israeli government admitted it. And it was many years after the event.
Well,
they were very famous for terrorism. They would kill people and wipe them out in the Sinai and other places. It was really. I'm not just talking about the war for independence of Israel. I'm talking about subsequent times that lead up to the USS Liberty.
Right. No, there's a lot of groundwork that goes into what happened here. I mean, none of this just occurred spontaneously, is what I'm saying. By
the way, I thought that the questions that your listeners sent in were all good. Each one of them, 3 of them, they were very, very intelligent, knowledgeable, and respectful.
No, and
not sexist.
Listen, absolutely, I appreciate that. By the way, and look, at all times, I mean, I love it when people challenge a little something that's being said, or add to it, or ask something to, so we can expand on it, because
right.
That's always the best. Contributing to the conversation. I appreciate all you guys who do that whenever you do. I'm not going to take phone calls tonight, but one of these times when we have Joan on, I will take phone calls, and so long as it does remain respectful and coherent, we will allow them. but not
well,
tonight,
that's right.
because there's still so much more to discuss.
All
though.
the questions that we had related directly to the incident, to the story, to the actual details of the story. And it's a very big story, and it has not been written about sufficiently. And I can see from the questions that I did the right thing by spending 4 years on this book, because as I was saying earlier, you think I'm silly. I would prefer to watch Steph Curry than work. But this is important to me, and it needs to be done. I suppose an East Coast audience would not appreciate that about Steph.
I don't know. What are you gonna do? I'm not sure about. I don't. I'm not much of a sports guy, believe it or not, Joan.
I do know, because when I said that about Steph, I got no reaction from you, so I figured,
Look, you know what it is that I am so engorged mentally with what's going on politically and like other historical. I don't have time for it. I mean, I like things like boxing. I like things like, baseball. I'm a little cerebral.
Right, you have a different sport. That's okay.
But to be honest with you, I mean, I barely know what's going on in any of those things at this point, because the breakneck speed of the news cycle, the amount of, the amount of crazy over the past couple of years. Remember, we had the JFK documents, partial dump.
Well, that was a big farce. That was a big bust.
Well, it did give us some things to work with.
All those documents that they said I had seen already. And Malcolm Blunt had seen them already. We'd seen them years ago. Then there was nothing new.
Oh, I know.
That I could see.
I talked to Malcolm Blunt briefly.
Do you know Blunt?
Well,
Blunt is the master archivist from the National Archives. Master.
I know it.
He knows more than anyone.
I know it. And I met him at the Lancer conference last year.
Mm-hmm. He and I have been working together for 20 years.
Right. Well, here's the thing. I know him by reputation, but that was the first time I ever met him. And give me in 7 words or less what you think of these documents that we're digging through right now. And he
wasn't interested, and the reason is that there was nothing there.
Well, unfortunately, the only thing that was there is the little bits of sand you got to pick out of the kitty litter, because we got some new cryptonyms, we got some new confirmations of this and that.
I'm not big on cryptonyms.
Well, I understand, but I'm just saying that this is what we got. We got next to nothing.
No, I know, because maybe a couple of words that were redacted previously, but basically there was nothing, no revelations. And the people at the National Archives, they warned us in advance. They said that there was going to be nothing, that they had seen them.
Well, but then again, there's still a tremendous amount withheld.
No, they're never going to release it. It's not going to be available. The same. Look at the Liberty story. To go back to that, I mean, it's very hard to get anything. I told you about that sentence that was left unredacted in the Joint Chiefs fact-finding document. Right. But that was, I couldn't believe I was seeing that. But that was not a question of releasing anything. It was a mistake that they made.
Well, see, that's the frightening thing.
And maybe it was, if it had any motive, it was that they hated Cyrus Vance and Lyndon Johnson for some reason. There's also internecine warfare. And, I don't know. I think that a lot of people must have hated Lyndon Johnson. He was a horrible person.
Well, insufferable from what I understand,
Well, vulgar and a liar and a terrible person. I don't know how to describe it even.
No, just a womanizer, very
nasty, there's that.
Just a nasty about it, and really entitled about who he was, and vicious. That's it. Vicious is another good word. Here we go. The person who taught creative writing to graduate students is struggling for good words to hit Lyndon Johnson with, because she knows who she's talking about. That's a joke.
There's nothing, anyway, forget about Lyndon Johnson. Because if the Liberty story doesn't destroy his reputation for honorability, I don't know what would.
Well, it sure as hell should, but
and the source. That was the source of the story about Johnson and the phone call. Was Dave, because when Dave was after the event occurred, Dave was in the hospital because the doctor had to cut the paint, slice the paint off his eyeballs. So he's in the USS America, and Admiral Geis, who was one of the admirals in the Sixth Fleet, said, could send him to my office, which was a room, when it's over. And so he went there, and then Admiral Geis said, you can't tell anybody about this until I'm dead. So it's a secret, but I can't have to tell somebody that we really tried, and that this is why the planes were never sent to the aid of the ship. So Dave is a very honorable person, old-fashioned American, and he kept his word. And then he was at one of the reunions of the Liberty veterans, and he's talking to a major admiral called Admiral Moorer, who was the admiral who's most supportive of the Liberty people, and actually became, this is a sidebar, Admiral Moorer became the head of the Joint Chiefs, and he tried to find the documents of what happened. And even as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he couldn't find anything. Everything was wiped out.
Wow.
So anyway, so David sees Admiral Moore, and he has a chance to talk to him. That's a big thing at the reunion. And then Admiral Moore says, by the way, Admiral Geis is dead. He died during surgery. And so then Dave felt free to tell the story about how Admiral Geis told him about how Johnson thwarted the sending of the planes to the aid of the USS Liberty.
Well, there it is. And all of this we've now discussed for, nearly an hour and 3/4, actually a little more, right? And, we really haven't gotten into the entire story, because for that, you're going to have to get the book. Okay? It's very simple.
Please buy my book and it's on pre-order now on Amazon.com. It's called Blood in the Water: How the U.S. and Israel Conspired to ambush the USS Liberty.
Right, and I am placing yet another link into the chat room over there, which will take you right to it if you want to order it. Now, what is the official release date right now?
The publication date, I think it's very unclear because they sort of delayed for 2 weeks for various reasons. But I think you could safely say the first week of December.
Right. So
it was originally meant to be November, but now it's December. So, but it's available on pre-order on Amazon.com.
Well, I bet if you pre-order it, because they show that there's a Kindle option and there's a paperback option on Amazon. So I'm sure if you pre-order,
there's a paperback. I didn't know that, but there's also Audible. Audible bought the rights for an audiobook. So then it's not out yet, but there'll be an audiobook there too.
Well, that's excellent news as well. So it'll be available through Audible. It'll be available through Amazon. I'll see if I can find the Audible link when it comes up, and maybe
I think there's an Audible link on the Amazon link.
Oh, okay, even better.
If you go, this is how I do it. I go, you have a long list of Amazon items like books. You click on books, and then there's a white space next to it. You put my name, Joan Mellen. Then up comes all my books, and the Liberty book should be the second after A Farewell to Justice. Click on that, and then you see all the different options.
Okay. Well, let's see. The page I have at the moment, I'll double check it, but the page I have at the moment actually shows hardcover and Kindle. But anyway.
But if you go down a little bit, doesn't it say Audible? Maybe you can't buy it yet because it's not been prepared yet. They have to have a reader and all this.
Well, right, and the thing is, it will be there eventually. So yeah, definitely, I love audiobooks personally for more than one reason. But audiobooks are great as well. I suggest you buy this no matter how it is you want to get it. And the key here is, hey, it's also just in time for Christmas presents, isn't it? So you guys can get
and I think if you
well, for somebody who's interested, especially in history, which is not often focused on, in the general canon, if you will, of, historical events. This is work done by somebody that I know very well is extremely thorough on any subject she writes on, and it's impossible for me to imagine that this is not a book, even though I haven't seen it. It's impossible for me to imagine that this book is not well worth whatever you're going to pay for it, and wouldn't make an excellent gift for somebody who is interested in the history behind the history they usually teach us. And I'll tell you right now, I don't recall for a second a word being uttered about the USS Liberty when I was in school. Here we go.
No, nothing.
Lots of stuff. They taught us about the Gulf of Tonkin, not the true story, but they taught us about it. But they didn't bother to even get into this. And, it's one of those things that contains probably more than 1/3 rail of American politics and historical reality. And, I bet that Joan has done the absolute, best possible book on this that she could do. And, with all the interviews, with all the documents, with backing up everything she says as per usual, this has got to be one of those essential things that you put in your collection, whether it's, your digital collection or physical book. I like physical books best, Joan, quite honestly. I like to have the physical book and the audio book when I can. But the truth is that, the physical book in my hand, I like it a lot better than having it in my Kindle library or whatever. But listen, if that's what you want to do, it's a few bucks less, and definitely it'll be ready for you by Christmas. So I would definitely suggest it and endorse people looking into it. So with all of that in mind, Joan, we've only got a few minutes left, and I'd kind of like to just turn the floor over to you and let you say whatever it is you want about this story. You've already, basically made your statement about the book, how you feel and how much work you put into it. Malcolm Blunt, who, I've discussed on this show, I haven't had him as a guest. I think I'm going to try and do that soon. But he'll be at
the conference in Dallas. Mm-hmm. He'll be at the Lancer conference in Dallas in November.
Right, again this year. I was just going to mention that because I had Deborah on and I had Larry on, So, I definitely would suggest that if you're able to go to the Lancer conference, you make sure to stop in on what Malcolm Blunt is doing. But quite honestly, if he's endorsing it, then that means he sees nothing that is not well researched. I don't see him saying, that this is a good piece of work unless it is.
I shouldn't have said that, right? I let him speak for himself.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm going on.
I was very happy when he said that. I mean, I think I like all my books, but he'd never said that before.
Never said that before about any of the other stuff?
He said this is the best.
Oh, wow.
He never said any other book was the best. We didn't work together on Garrison. He didn't know anything about Garrison, but we did work together on the Cuba book and on the Haiti book. And on Malcolm Wallace. He was a great help to me on Malcolm Wallace. And, of course, so was, what's his name? Walt Brown.
Well, yeah, Walt Brown was definitely a help on the Malcolm Wallace stuff. What was it? Bruce Campbell Adamson helped you out on...
Bruce Campbell Adamson did some really interesting work on Haiti, on George de Mohrenschildt. Now, my book is about Haiti, not about it, but in the George de Mohrenschildt story, Bruce Adamson did the major research on that. No one gives him credit either.
Right. Well, listen, that's why I'm
mentioning it.
Yeah, that's why I'm mentioning these guys, because they have done some incredible work and haven't been given enough credit. Much like you, Joan, you're not given enough credit for the work you've done. And again,
I consider that's because I'm a woman.
Well, I don't know if that's what it is. If that's what it is, I'm terribly sorry to hear that, because, again...
I'm not sure about that. You never know when somebody is discriminating against you. You never know what it is.
Yeah, the exact motive might elude you. But it's unjustified, because here's the thing. If you don't even care whose name is on the book, and you just take a look at the quality of the work, bottom line... I very much endorse the stuff that Joan writes because I can't see how it could have been done better usually. Although, the one time you did update the one book and I said, is this going to be any better? And it was.
You mean A Farewell to Justice?
Yes.
Well, that was really, I had the opportunity to go over everything and all the things I had discovered after the book was published, which was in 2005. It was published again, and I think for the 50th anniversary,
right.
2013, right? Is that right? Yes. And that was, I think, really worth doing. I'm glad I did it. And also I was able to use the cover, which was by a famous Life magazine photographer named Lynn Pelham. And he had died, and his wife gave me the rights to use it, which was very kind.
Right. And, of course, if you explore the other things that Joan has written about on her author's page, or if you go to joanmellen.com, you'll also see the post there about this upcoming event in New Hampshire. And, again, like I said, link to buy the book is probably comes off your website as well. I just went and found it on Amazon myself, but other people, you know what? I'm going to give you all those links. You don't have to go looking for them. And I urge you to explore her other writings as well. I've often said if there was ever going to be a biography written about myself or anybody I, cared about, I would certainly, make sure that Joan Mellen was the one who was given, first offer of commission to do so. Because again, you're also a powerful biographer. You said you included, one man's life story.
I have the skill of a biographer, so I use that. And Dave said that I put him in the book too much, but he's a very interesting person. Imagine he had never wanted to be in the Navy when he was a poor boy up there in the Canadian border. And one day he saw a sign in the post office that said examinations for the college. So he thought, he's a chance to get to college. And then he didn't realize that the applications were for the service academies. So suddenly he finds himself in Annapolis at the Naval Academy. And it was really very hard. He didn't know how to swim, nothing. And he wanted to leave. And the rule that the Navy had was you had to get your mother's permission or your parents' permission if you want to leave, and she wouldn't give it. So he stayed and became Dave, a commander of the Navy.
Well, and there you are, and destiny becomes what it is. But again, the name of the book is Blood in the Water, How the U.S. and Israel Conspired to Ambush the USS Liberty. Yeah, I paused there on purpose. Just to make sure you heard it right. Blood in the Water, How the U.S. and Israel Conspired to Ambush the USS Liberty. That's the name of the book, and the author is Joan Mellen, who has been my guest for the past 2 hours. And, Joan, I thank you so much because, again, as I said, every time I have a conversation with you, I learn something, and I hope the audience does too, and I also hope that they follow up and get this book. I certainly want a copy of it as soon as it is available. And I hope that other people hearing this are also going to want it. So,
well, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate all your kind words. Thank you very much. It's been fun and painless and enjoyable. And I look forward to being on the show again.
Which we will definitely do. As a matter of fact, I'd like to revisit this when the book is out and I've had a chance to look at it, because I'm sure I'll have many other questions that,
No, that's good.
And, listen, I think the more that we talk about this and the more that people recognize that there are things like this that go on, the more chance we have of maybe preventing these types of situations occurring in the future. I am very much of the mindset that a lot of men and women have been left on the field of battle by our government, have been left to fend for themselves after their service, have been abandoned or abused.
Well, I didn't mention one of the things was there was only one doctor on the ship.
Well, right, and we told that story in an earlier podcast, but you know what?
Okay.
But you know what? I think we'll get to it again in another one because that is a hell of a story. But we're out of time. Joan Mellen again. The book is Blood in the Water, How the U.S. and Israel Conspired to Ambush the USS Liberty. The Ochelli Effect is done. Transistor Radio is up next, and I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. No matter who you are, where you are, I am merely Ochelli. You guys are all the effect. Buy Joan Mellen's book. Have a good night.